Hi, I'm Rachel Lancaster, and this is the Magnificent Midlife Podcast. This is where we celebrate women in midlife and beyond. We challenge the status quo and bash those negative stereotypes about being an older woman. We're not over the hill at 40, 50, 60. We're just getting started, and the world needs us now more than ever. I'll be talking all things midlife, about issues that matter, and sharing fabulous stories of amazing women doing very cool stuff. Now's our time. Today I welcome Susan Saunders back to the podcast. Susan is the co-author of the best-selling book, The Age Well Project, and author of her latest book, The Age Well Plan, which is a blueprint for how to age well. She's already been on the podcast to share all about what we can do to age well, but this time we're going to talk specifically about what we can do to promote our brain health. Welcome back, Susan.
Thank you so much for having me back. I feel so privileged. It's such an honour. Thank you very much, Rachel.
Well, I just know there is so much knowledge in your brain, and I just want to share it with the world because I just think we all need to know this stuff. And it's not difficult, as we're going to find out. It's not difficult. It's just about being aware and remembering. But I'd like to start with a reminder of why this topic is so very personal to you.
Well, it's really interesting. We're talking about brain health today because the focus for all of us as we get older is keeping our brain sharp, staying on top of things, reducing our risk of cognitive decline, which is so common as we get older, reducing our risk of dementia. And my whole kind of journey to aging well started because when I was 36, my mum was diagnosed with dementia. And so I became her carer, and her mother had also had dementia. So I was very conscious of this kind of pattern in my family and the devastation that it causes. It's something that's very, very close to my heart, and I have subsequently discovered that I carry the APOE4 gene, which is the gene linked to increased Alzheimer's risk. 1 in 4 people have it. I'm not unusual by any means, but that has really sort of focused my attention on what we can do to keep our brains working as well as possible for as long as possible. And as you say, a lot of things we need to do are so simple and cheap and easy. It's just knowing about them and also having the kind of motivation to stay on track with them. And so what happened with my mum is very much my motivation for that.
But that is a huge burden for you to carry, isn't it? So how have you adapted to living with that knowledge?
Good question. I think I have adapted by doing everything I can to reduce my risk. And that is really empowering. And by having the knowledge, by doing the research that I've been doing for many years now, so on my own, and then with my friend Annabelle when we launched the Age Well Project blog, and then wrote the first book, and then I wrote this follow-up book as a health coach, more of a how-to, having all that knowledge and now being able to reach out and help other people through my coaching, that feels really empowering. That feels like I'm doing what I can. If the bullet's got my number on it, if I get dementia, so be it. There's no absolute cure, no one thing which is going to stop us getting it, but at least I can say, hold my hand up, I did my best.
It's very powerful, and it's about taking back control, isn't it? It's not sort of saying, well, this is the way it's going to be and therefore I just need to suck it up. It's actually, well, what can I do to try and change that prognosis scenario, whatever it might be? And all the knowledge that you've discovered has actually it's absolutely shown that we can have that control over what happens to our brain.
Yes.
So let's kick off first of all. I've heard a lot about inflammation, and I don't really understand why inflammation
is bad for us as we age. So can you explain about inflammation? What does it mean, and why do we get inflammation as we age?
Our bodies are such miracles. That's one thing I have really realized, and they are there to, all our systems work so hard to protect us. And if we get injured, if we cut ourselves, our body will send inflammation to deal with that cut on our hand. Say it will get red, it will get sore, and it will heal. And the inflammation is the process that does that. And that's acute inflammation, and that's our friend. That's good. But what happens as we get older is that we get a build-up of various substances within the body, which I will explain, but various things build up in the body, and the body feels that it's under attack, and therefore thinks, right, I need to deal with this. I need to send inflammation to this site. But if that's your whole body, and if it's constant, if it's chronic, the body is constantly in a kind of low level setting of inflammation, and that's really bad for us. That we can't sustain that. It's like being stressed all the time. It just becomes unsustainable. What's happening as we get older is that we get a build-up of toxins from environmental factors, from what we eat, that kind of thing, pollution, all kinds of things build up in us, which have come from the outside, and that causes our body to react and for us to become inflamed. And then there are all these things happening inside us, really basic metabolic processes like breathing and eating produce oxidation. And when we're younger, we have plenty of antioxidants, and they go and they deal with these oxidative molecules called free radicals. Essentially, they pair up, they buddy up. But as we get older, that system starts to slow down, it starts to fail. We have too many free radicals causing oxidation in our bodies, which is basically rusting. We are basically rusting like a car as we get older. And that rust is what's causing inflammation in the body, because our body is trying to deal with it, and it doesn't have the right materials unless we give it the right materials. And so it's constantly dealing with a state of inflammation, which is why scientists talk about inflammaging. So inflammation is so closely linked to aging that the two things kind of go hand in hand, because inflammation ages us, and as we get older, we produce more inflammation in the body.
Wow, thank you for explaining that to me, because I've never really understood it, and you hear it. And what I should say to people now, actually, I meant to say this at the beginning, is this might get a bit technical. So if you want to stop the podcast now, go and get a notebook or listen back to it later. There's lots of juicy information here. And we'll obviously have all the show notes. We'll have everything in the show notes. But if you want to get a notebook, go and get one now. So you've explained why we suffer from inflammation. So what can we do about it to try and reduce the impact of inflammation?
Well, we want to try and deal with what's there and what happens naturally just by breathing and eating. And we want to reduce the risk of producing more inflammation in the body. So one of the simplest ways is to make sure that we get lots and lots of fruit and vegetables, which are rich in antioxidants. So they will give their molecules to the rusty old oxidation, and they will buddy up and stop causing inflammation in the body. It's a really kind of major area of research at the moment. There's a lot of money going into kind of researching how we can deal with inflammation as we get older, and how we deal with things like zombies. I know you want to talk about zombies.
Such a good name.
Zombie cells sounds really weird, but they are essentially, it's a term for senescent cells which have died off in our bodies but have not been burnt up as fuel or being reabsorbed in some way, they just hang around, and they themselves will pump out more inflammation. They don't sort of just curl up and die. They just sit in our bodies, pumping out inflammatory substances. So that's more for the body to deal with. It's another thing. And interesting research was published right at the end of last year that showed that the Alzheimer's brain has more zombies, more of these kind of half-dead cells that are hanging around pumping out inflammation than a healthy brain. So it's clearly something if we want good brain health, it's something we need to be dealing with. So lots of research going on into how we can reduce these zombie cells, how we can reduce the inflammation that's going on in our bodies. And actually, what people are finding is the best way of dealing with it is with phytonutrients, which just means nutrients from plants, i.e. eating vegetables. And the most powerful of these phytonutrients, it seems, to deal with the zombies are called quercetin and fisetin. There's a lot of research going on into these two things. I mean, it might not work. This is why research is so interesting, that they might find it doesn't work. But at the moment, there's a lot of interest in these compounds, and the best sources of them now that we can eat are onions and tomatoes, which I love, because they're such simple, basic, cheap foods, and they're really, really powerful antioxidants, really powerful when it comes to brain health and to fighting inflammation.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because we hear a lot about following the Mediterranean diet, which we've talked about as well in the past. But tomatoes and onions are just staples of that diet, isn't it?
Yes, and others as well. I think it's interesting. The Mediterranean diet has been so well researched, but that all started with American Western doctors who loved going on holiday to Italy. It's true. And and we shouldn't kind of ignore the fact that there are many other cultures that their ancestral eating patterns are extremely healthy, and most Asian food, South Asian food, contains tomatoes and onions. Mexican food,
yes.
It's not.
Yes, right, of course. Silly me. Yes, they all do, don't they?
It's easy for us to talk about the Mediterranean diet, and it has been so well researched, which is really important, that there's a huge body of evidence about it. But at the same time, it's about eating the food of your ancestors and eating kind of quite simple, easy, cheap foods, essentially.
So that was what I was going to go on to next. Is what can we learn from the diets of our ancestors? And it's keeping it simple and going back to basics, I guess.
Yes, and not eating foods that our grandmothers or great grandmothers wouldn't recognise. It's eating food which is food, rather than food that was made in a factory with emulsifiers and chemicals and all sorts of other things. It's food that's food and not processed, because our bodies just can't deal with all these strange chemicals and sort of frankenfoods, and they contain a lot of unhealthy fats or highly refined carbohydrates or sugars or whatever that just knock our bodies out of whack and therefore create more inflammation, which is exactly what we're trying to avoid, because that is the key thing linked to aging and brain aging.
And I guess also it's about less meat, isn't it, really, as well, because our ancestors didn't have a chance to eat half as much meat as we eat now.
Yes, exactly. I'm certainly not anti-meat at all, but I think it's about eating quality meat in smallish quantities and not eating it 3 times a day. And certainly for our forebears, it was a luxury food, and it was a high day or holiday if you you've killed a chicken or a pig or cow, whatever. So it's eating meat that has been humanely raised, pasture raised, and say not eating too much of it.
So I know also that you are a big fan of intermittent fasting, and I've tried this, and I like it sometimes. Sometimes I find it conflicts a little bit with my blood sugar levels, and I sort of struggle to manage that. But why is intermittent fasting becoming so popular in the age well arena?
Well, it's actually a good way of killing zombies, among other things. So it's when we're not feeding our bodies food all the time, they have to look around for other fuel sources, fat being an obvious one, and also broken, damaged cells are what's going to get burnt up first. And so this is a really good opportunity for the body to repair and to heal, to go into a process known as autophagy, which is literally translate as eating oneself. So killing off these zombie cells, burning them up, so less inflammation in the body, and giving our bodies a chance to rest and repair and digest, and to rather than constantly thinking, right, there's all this food around, I've got to digest it. Thinking, okay, don't have to worry about digestion. Let's think about what needs to be repaired. Can I deal with some of this kind of DNA damage that's going on because this body's aging? So, okay, let's try and fix some of the DNA damage. And again, it's really powerful for the body and the brain to let it relax, and not relax, but let it have an opportunity to do other things other than digesting. And so
that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. So fast. I mean, it is just. I mean, there are all sorts of big words, but actually, it is just common sense, really, that digestion is really a big ask of our bodies. They're really good at it, but there's a lot going on. And if you think, okay, well, let's just stop that for 12 hours or whatever your sort of fasting window might be, then the body can do other things. So yeah, I know I'm a really big fan of intermittent fasting. It works for me. It doesn't work for everybody, and I think I would say this particularly to the midlife audience, that if you're on a hormonal roller coaster right now, being hungry or having blood sugar that's going haywire may not be the thing you want to do, and you may not want to start your day without food. And how I intermittently fast is to finish dinner at about 8, between 8:30, and then I don't eat again till about 11:30 or so normally, and so that gives me about a 15-hour fasting window. So that's time restricted eating is the sort of term for it. But if you're struggling with hormones at the moment, you might feel that actually in the morning you need some food. So you might want to think about, can I eat a bit earlier? I've got clients who will eat with their children at 5 or 6 or something like that, and then sort of have breakfast the next day, and they've still maybe done 14 hours, but they're not sort of having to get through the morning having not eaten, if that's an issue. So it's very, it can be very flexible.
That's what I tend to do. So I very rarely have dinner these days, actually. So I'll eat most of my calories, during the day. So I often don't have breakfast until quite late, so I'll go for a run. But then I'll have quite a big lunch, and that's my main meal, my lunch. But I might not have it till 2 or 3 in the afternoon, and then I'll sort of snack around 5 or 6. And I'll try. I don't always succeed, obviously, but I'll try not to eat anything after that. So I've got that window as well. And yeah, as you say, there are many ways to do it. But do you do it every day?
Yeah, more or less. To be honest, it's become a habit now to just to make breakfast a mid-morning activity or a late morning activity rather than a beginning of the day. I just don't think about it now at the beginning of the day. I'm not don't feel hungry really. So it's yeah, it has just become a habit. I think it'd be quite weird for me if I had breakfast at 7 or 8 now. It would just feel strange. So yeah, so it hasn't. It's taken a little while. I've built up gradually. The easiest thing to start with is a 12-hour fast and 12-hour eating window, and then try and reduce it a bit from there.
And of course, you've got to fit it in around what other people in the house
Yeah.
are doing as well, and the extent to which you're eating together and stuff. I mean,
Yes, of course.
my husband tends to work late in the evening, so there isn't really an evening meal, for either of us, so it works. But you talked before we hit record about that this is a good stress to put the body under on a regular basis because of that clearing up process.
Yes, exactly. It's one of those things that puts the body into what's called hormesis, which is a state of good stress, a state of the body going, okay, things are different. I'm hungry, or I'm cold, or I'm working really, really hard, exercising. Let's keep everything as kind of well repaired as possible. Let's go into repair mode. Let's deal with this. Now let's burn up some of the crap, get rid of that. We'll sort of be in a better state to deal with this stress of hunger or tough exercise or cold. I know you wanted to talk about cold.
I did, yes, because I remember on the first podcast, I didn't mention one of the things that had really struck me in your books, the bit about having a cold shower. And we're recording this at 11:30 in the morning, and I have had a cold shower. Yay! I have done it. I felt inspired, and I try to, but it's really hard. And so what I'm doing is what you advised, which is start off with a nice hot shower, and then as you get towards the end, turn it down. And I think you said 30 seconds was enough, but 30 seconds is a very long time. And I'm standing there. And it's fine. I can do it on my back, but turning around to the front is much more difficult. So I stand there like this, I don't know, complete Wally, standing there backwards to the shower and I'm counting. And I feel I've done really well if I get to 30.
But are you breathing? Because it's really...
I don't know. I'll have to work that out tomorrow. So maybe I'll stop breathing.
Actually, that makes such a difference. And that's the sort of Wim Hof method. Wim Hof is the Dutch Iceman. He sits in ice baths for days at a time. And he teaches this sort of system of immersing yourself in cold for all sorts of health reasons, and his big thing is that you breathe through it. And actually I found that really helps if you're just super conscious as you're turning that dial from hot to cold, really conscious of the breath, deep breaths through the nose, not going
that's probably what I'm doing.
That makes it so
good.
Much worse.
I'm glad we've got that sorted.
That makes it so much worse. It's sort of consciously preparing for it and going into it. And 30 seconds is great. Yes, I've got up to a minute and a half now.
Really? Yeah. Oh my goodness.
And
you'll be outdoor swimming soon.
I know. I can't wait. So Annabelle, my writing partner on the Age Well project, has started swimming in the sea. She started in February, and she's down in Sussex. So and she wrote a blog post about it last week. But yes, it's cold. She said the worst thing is, of course, you practice in the bathroom with a cold shower, but that's fine. Of course, you're then stepping into a bathroom, putting a nice warm towel on and everything. But when you're on a stony beach in Sussex, the wind's howling. You can't walk up the beach because the stones hurt so much. And it's a different experience, but very exhilarating. And she really loves it.
It seems to be a midlife woman thing. I mean, there's a lot of women who are outdoor swimming now. I know lots in my world who are doing it, and they swear by it. They absolutely love it. So I'm not quite there yet, but I am trying the cold shower. Inspired by you.
Oh, great. No, it's great because it's another very, very simple thing that we can do that doesn't cost anything, doesn't take much time, and has a powerful impact on our bodies and our brains as we age. So it's just another thing, a small thing to kind of work into the day.
See, I don't have any caffeine, But that cold shower really gives me a jolt. I guess it's like having a triple espresso. I don't know because I
Yeah.
don't do caffeine, but it feels a bit like that. I really do feel energized after it.
Yes, because your body is going, what the hell is this? Oh God, this is tough. Right. Okay. Let's be ready. Let's fight this. I'm up for it. So yeah, no, it's really good.
So there you go, everybody listening. Go and have a cold shower. And you recommend
Oh
also
no, I
to
say
warm up.
no. It doesn't. Sorry, it doesn't work for you. I have to say the caveat: it doesn't work for everybody. Some people find it really stressful and difficult, and if you've got a heart condition, all those things, it's not necessarily the right thing. And you be guided by your own health. That's the health warning.
I think it's worth experimenting, though. I think,
Yeah.
even if you just do 2 seconds or 3 seconds and
Yes.
then just work up,
Yes. We had a message on Instagram from someone saying, "I got to 7 seconds." Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that's
Keep
good.
going.
I know that's good. Okay, so let's talk about our gut as well, because I know that is an important part of eating for brain health. So why do we need to think about our gut, and what should we be considering?
The reason we have to think about gut health when we're thinking about brains and our brain health is that there is a kind of information superhighway called the vagus nerve, which links our guts and our brains. It's a direct relationship, a direct messaging system that goes between the two. And we talk about gut instinct, and then we process gut instinct in our brains, but our guts are so closely related to the two that gut instinct makes complete sense. And it also makes sense that if our gut is inflamed, that inflammation travels to the brain via this nerve, and because we're talking about a lot about inflammation and Alzheimer's, dementia being inflammation-related diseases. There is this travel system between gut and brain. So you want to have a really kind of tip-top gut. What's going on in our gut is that we have these microbiota, trillions and trillions of cells. We have 10 times as many microbiota in our gut as we have human cells. We are essentially just vehicles for this sort of teeming universe of microbiota. And it's really interesting. Some very recent research came out that showed that the microbiota in our gut flora, send instructions to certain cells in the brain, telling them to fight inflammation. There's this constant communication between gut and brain, and the gut is telling the brain to deal with inflammation, which can lead to cognitive decline. So it's really important that our guts are in the best possible health they can be, so that they can do this work and send these messages. And it's fascinating that this research is coming out all the time, and our microbiota are doing so much. They're sending messages, and they are also producing substances which are really important for the body. They will ferment particular types of fiber to make substances that work well in the body. Short chain fatty acids and are really, really important, and the gut makes those by fermenting certain types of fiber. And there's one in particular which is really important, a short chain fatty acid called butyrate, and that has been linked to lower levels of amyloid plaque in the brain. And amyloid plaque is the substance which is found in the Alzheimer's brain. It forms clumps in the brain and kills off brain cells, essentially. So if there is something we can make in our guts, which then goes into the body and has this impact on the brain, we really want to be getting some, and that's butyrate. again, it's really simple. It's something the body makes when it digests very basic foods, beans, legumes, pulses, that kind of thing. Cooled potatoes are full of resistant starch. So, potato salad, that kind of thing, really good for us. Oats, especially if they're raw or have been soaked. Fruits like apples and raspberries. Onions, I think, are the ultimate superfood, actually. Leeks, that kind of thing. So you just kind of quite simple, basic, everyday foods. We just have to remember to eat them and to work them into our diets. But they have this really powerful effect on the brain and on brain health, and reducing levels of amyloid plaque is fantastic, but actually having enough butyrate from the digestion of these foods is also linked to good mental health and to feeling happy. So that's really important too.
And what about fermented foods? Because I hear quite a lot about fermented foods for the health of our gut.
Yes, so all these trillions of flora, they like to have lots to feed on. So that's those kind of high fiber foods that they can ferment. That's their food source, essentially, and they like to have lots of new friends, so that there are always new ones. They've always got new playmates, essentially. It's one way of looking at it, and they come from the fermented foods, because fermented foods are living foods, and they have these bugs in them essentially already. So you're just putting them kind of ready-made into the body. So foods like, I absolutely love kimchi, which is actually a Korean kind of fermented chili and cabbage usually, but green vegetables. It's really tasty. And kefir, which is a fermented milk or water, quite sort of available in supermarkets now. And kombucha, which is a fermented tea. Some people make it themselves. I have to say I don't, but I do buy it from time to time. But actually, I think making it itself is probably a good idea, because it's quite expensive in the shops. So yeah, so it's just giving our gut friends, but it's really important to give them plenty of food that they like, which are these resistant starch, fibrous foods, cheap foods like oats and beans.
And there's sauerkraut as well, isn't there?
Yeah, so sauerkraut is a fermented vegetable like kimchi. And again, it's interesting. These are really traditional foods. We're talking about foods of our ancestors. These foods are thousands of years old. They're not. I know it's all sort of wellness kind of happy stuff now, and they're expensive and everything. But actually, these foods have been around for thousands of years. All of them are part of traditional diets, because if you're eating lots of very fibrous vegetables, and perhaps your meat or your protein source is quite stringy, it's your kind of old stringy cow you've had for ages or whatever, you need your gut to be in really good health. And obviously people worked out millennia ago that fermented foods were the way forward.
Well, it doesn't just keep them around for longer, it's also good for our health as well, isn't it? It's so clever, actually.
Yeah.
So simple and yet so clever.
Yes, exactly. And it's interesting how we lost so much, or we have lost so much of that sort of food culture, because there's so much processed food around, because buying processed food makes profit for a lot of big companies, is what it comes down to. I hate to be political, but that's sort of what it comes down to, that we're sold all these very highly processed, heavily sugared foods because they're making profit for a corporation. And it's they're not going to say to you, oh, actually, why don't you just go back and eat what your great grandmothers were making, because that doesn't help the bottom line. Sorry,
I have heard this. No, go for it. Go for it. I'm totally all about. I don't want to give my money to big business so that they can exploit me further. No, yeah, I'm totally on side with that. But I've heard that thing about if your great grandmother can't recognise the food stuff, it doesn't deserve to be in your diet.
Yes, then it's probably not food. Yes, as we were saying, it's just it's not going to be something that is going to be particularly good for your body, because it's been made in a factory. not grown or harvested, or in some way.
And I haven't done it yet, but it's not that difficult to pickle cabbage at home, is it?
No, it's not. It's not. Actually, I haven't done it either.
I know, I'm a bit ness. I'm sort of like, it's not difficult to do. I haven't done it. But...
I haven't done it. And I have read instructions for making things like kimchi. I thought, gosh, that is quite tricky. And I did try making kefir with, you get these little grains, which are sort of living, I don't know what they are, but they're sort of a bacterial, yeasty type thing. And you put them in, put them in milk in the fridge, I think, for a few days. And I just thought it was disgusting. It was just like off milk, basically. But when you buy kefir in the supermarket, it's like lovely, creamy, yogurty kind of thing. So I don't quite know where I went wrong. But I'm teaching a group class at the moment, at Eat Well to Age Well evening class, and a couple of the ladies on that are doing their own kefir. No, not own kefir, own kombucha. Doing their own kombucha and you get a thing called a Scooby, which is this big yeasty, bubbly thing. And so they're making tea and water kefirs and kombuchas and different things. So so it can be done. It can be done. I just haven't done it yet.
And that's not the same as yogurt, huh? Yogurt can't fulfill the same thing.
Well, yeah, I mean, yogurt can. Yogurt is live. Yeah, live yogurt.
It's live.
It's the live, and it's got to be live and not full of sugar and that kind of stuff. But yeah.
So you have told us an incredible amount already. Is there anything else that we really would benefit from including in our diet that you haven't mentioned already? And is there anything you'd like to pass on from your daily routine that would be worth including?
Well, I think one thing to mention when we're talking about brain health and reducing dementia risk is to take out, to make sure you just be really clear on keeping levels of processed food and processed sugars as low as possible, because putting our brains and bodies on a kind of insulin roller coaster of eating lots of sugary food. Our body has to produce insulin to deal with it. Then we kind of crash down the other side. And then our bodies become resistant to that insulin. We stop listening to insulin, and our bodies have to store the glucose elsewhere. So we end up with belly fat, all this kind of stuff. If we eat less sugar, less refined carbohydrate, then we stay sensitive to insulin, and we absolutely don't want to be on a path towards diabetes if we can possibly help it. Some people obviously have type 1 diabetes, that's a different thing, but type 2 diabetes, if we can reduce our chances of going in that direction, then that's really good, not only for our bodies, but our brains. Alzheimer's has been referred to as type 3 diabetes. We need our brains to be sensitive to insulin because insulin has a protective effect in the brain. So that's really, it's really important that we maintain a good relationship with insulin, essentially, and don't overload it with lots of sugar and processed foods. So that was a don't. So a do. I know one of my probably most important food for brain health as we get older is to make sure we get enough omega-3 fatty acids, EPA and DHA, and the best source of those are oily fish, what's called smash fish, which stands for salmon, mackerel, anchovies, sardines, herring, those kind of fish, and the oils in those fish directly feed our brains. And so it's really important that we get enough. And I know lots of people say, but I hate fish, or I'm vegetarian, or I'm vegan, or whatever. And then I think it's worth exploring supplement. I'm not big on supplements, but it's worth exploring supplements that will deliver a similar level of EPA and DHA, marine algae supplements, because those essential fatty acids directly fuel our brains, essentially. And there's a really strong correlation between those fatty acids and thinking skills in older adults. The evidence is pretty overwhelming. So I'm big on that.
And fatty fish is usually a big component in the diets of the people in the blue zones, where the people live longest, isn't it? Generally speaking.
Indeed, fish. Places like Okinawa in Japan, the Nicoya Peninsula in Costa Rica, and Sardinia and Ikaria, Greek island. Lots of fish is a big component of the diet.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much. It's just been amazing to have all of this knowledge, but to be able to share it. It's fantastic. Do you have any parting words for what you want people to know to really take care of their brains?
I think the most important thing is to believe that you can, and believe that you can make a difference to how you're going to age and how your brain will age, and that the steps to take are often very simple. It's very small tweaks to lifestyle or diet, and I've talked about some science and some big words and all the rest of it, but actually the really important thing is believing that your own lifestyle can make a huge difference. Nothing is set in stone. You can make a real difference.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Magnificent Midlife Podcast. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe or follow, share it, and I'd love a 5-star review. It really helps other listeners find the podcast. You can find out more information about this episode in the show notes at magnificentmidlife.com. That's also where you can access one-to-one mentoring with me, my membership program, and other resources to help make your midlife magnificent. Make the most of your next chapter. Help me change the world, one magnificent midlife woman at a time.